We're just going to be reacting to this specific video right here.
Fast food is popular because it caters to every tasty thing we humans crave: fat, sugar, and salt. But perhaps its biggest appeal is that it's cheap. At least that's what I thought. If everything on the dollar menu is going to be $5 now, it seems like we're getting ripped off with packaging that looks like it's for a bargain brand. So in this video, I'll be rebranding items from popular fast food restaurants to make them look more expensive, with each brand looking more fancy than the last. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. And up first, we have a standard beef taco from Taco Bell. Now, I'm just going to be honest here, guys. Out of all the fast food restaurants, Taco Bell has to have the least appealing packaging. I mean, it looks like somebody just squirted condiments on the box, slapped on some text you can't even read, and the execs were like, yep, that's our brand. Which is a shame because Taco Bell is inspired by Mexican cuisine, and Mexico has a super fun and vibrant culture full of parties and celebrations. The exact opposite of this. So for my new design, I want to bring all of that energy to this brand, while still keeping Taco Bell's traditional color scheme of yellow, purple, and pink. Because you know, a lot of people seem to think that the only way to make something look expensive is to have like a bunch of golden leaf fancy fonts and immaculate illustrations. But check out all these high-priced items in the grocery stores. None of them have that kind of design style. There's a bunch of ways to make things not look cheap, and I'm going to try out a few different ones throughout the video. But the simplest way is to just get something that's well put together, cohesive, and that looks like you actually tried. Now that I've got these wiggly lines in the background for movement, I need to figure out how the logo will go on here. Honestly, now that I look at it, it doesn't quite have the feeling that I want for this. It's just too sterile and plain. But if you check out Taco Bell's old logos, this one from 1972 has so much more personality. And it's actually great because I wanted to have the name much larger on here so everyone can actually read what restaurant this taco is from, which would also be helped by making it a color that isn't pure black. I might even give it a slight wavy shape for extra liveliness. Some of these letters have really bad kerning, which just means like the spacing between each of them is not the same. So I will fix that first before moving on. Of course, we'll need to get the actual bell on here, which could use some repairs because the original logo cuts off its sides, but that should fit snugly in this spot right over here. And frankly, I feel like we have to make this bell yellow. One, because it's a bell, and two, because it'll really stand out from that dark purple background behind it. I do feel like we could use a little shading on this though, so it doesn't feel too flat. A little shine to show the metal is nice and clean, and we will probably need a stroke around the text just to help separate those elements. Finally, a tiny drop shadow to ever so slightly raise the whole logo off the background. Now, you guys know I'm a big fan of throwing in a little texture here and there, which I think works perfectly for this design by giving it more of a handmade look. Now, in order for this brand to feel like a...
Guys, imagine if Taco Bell just made the actual design of, like, that would be crazy.
lively party in Mexico, getting people excited to eat at the restaurant, we'll need a few things. First, every great party has a swarm of lines draping down from above that are covered in decorative flags, each of which will be bending and flowing as the wind blows, adding even more movement to our scene. Next, we'll need some authentic Mexican landscaping. One of these will of course be a cactus, since Mexico has over 300 varieties of these prickly little plants. I am keeping the illustration fairly stylized and pretty low detail, but I definitely want to pop in at least a couple spines here and there. And then, well, I really just need to fill in this little space down here, so I'll put in a tiny blue plant that can be whatever your imagination wants it to be, I suppose. Finally, Mexico is widely known for its unique music, with one of the most traditional being, of course, mariachi. But all of those instruments are too big to fit in this tiny little spot here, so the simplest Latin American instrument I can think of is a maraca. And really, I only have room to show the top part of it, but I do want to give it a cool little design around the middle, and maybe even some shaking lines to help people understand what it actually is, instead of mistaking it for some strange egg or something. Then all these elements can get a background shadow to match everything else. I'm thinking some rim lights might also look kind of cool, like maybe having a blue one come off here from the right, and then a red one coming off here from the left, which would also spill over and hit the bell. The problem I'm having though is that all of these elements have that same flat, semi-shaded look, and they're just visually running together, but I'm wondering if some neat little patterns might be a good way to help separate the styles. Maybe some jagged lines on whatever plant this is supposed to be, and finally some swirly wood grain on the maraca. And with that, the new design is done. Personally, if you didn't know the Taco Bell brand and you just saw both of these designs out in the wild, I'm thinking most people would guess that the new taco is at least double or triple the price of the old one, just based on the packaging. Up next, we have a good old sub sandwich from Subway. Now, Subway's branding is pretty standard, very minimal, sans serif text, basically just two colors, green and yellow. I think Subway just kind of feels cheap because half of them are inside gas stations, which you know was fine back in the day when they were blasting commercials for the $5 footlong, where every footlong sub was only $5. But now that the average footlong is $8 to $15, Subway's branding is definitely going to have to step it up to be worthy of a price like that. So let's start out with a natural feeling tan color for the package, because I think we really need to lean in on the healthy nature of Subway, because anything that appears healthy is automatically seen as more expensive. I mean, most places you just ask for extra cheese on your sandwich, but at Subway, you can ask for extra veggies and then extra cheese. Then let's get the logo on here, which I'll make a dark brown to match the wrapper. Now, one tiny change that should instantly make the logo feel more premium is to add some serifs to the letters, which are just these little pointy bits. Nothing too big, it just gives it a little touch of elegance. Most of the meat from Subway is not what you would consider the pinnacle of health, so let's focus on the veggies. So I'm thinking we just plop a big old tomato on here, but alone that probably isn't enough, so I'll go grocery shopping for some juicy green lettuce, just like this little guy, and maybe even a nice block of cheese. Because even though cheese isn't particularly healthy, it's expensive, and everybody knows it. So let's see if I can nestle all those ingredients together in a cute little bundle. You know, there is just something about seeing raw ingredients. It feels so much more premium than if you show them after they're prepped. Like, when was the last time you looked at a pile of shredded lettuce and thought, wow, that's amazing. But I feel like these almost need to be presented on something though, instead of just floating there. So how about something like an old rustic looking cutting board? Kind of like these ingredients are about to be cut up to make your sandwich. Now sometimes I do find that putting realistic food images on a package just doesn't quite give you the style that you want. Because here I'm really looking for more of a rustic, almost vintage style. And one way I know how to achieve that is to make these look like paintings instead of photos. Several products actually use this tactic, like Chobani for their different yogurt flavors. And now I could go and hand paint a replica of all these items. Or I could just throw on a Photoshop filter that does it for me. And I think something like that looks convincing enough. But one thing I can do to even better help merge this painting with the paper is to apply a color grading over top of it to bring down the highlights to more of a tan color and throw in a little more brown. Let's scooch the logo over for better balance. But you know, nowadays people are very concerned about where their food actually comes from. I mean, who's to say this tomato wasn't grown in some lab, spliced together with goat beans, and constantly pumped full of preservatives 24/7. So why don't we utilize some of this empty space here to put in some kind of beautiful illustration like of a farm. So I found this picture of some nice grassy fields, and I think I just want to warp the land so it gently wraps around the logo. And you notice it doesn't really even show rows of plants or anything, because I'm going to apply the same painting filter we used over on the food, and then just make the whole thing a single brown tone. That'll just be faded into the background so it doesn't draw too much attention, but the subtle abstract hint of grassy landscapes and fluffy trees still gives people the idea that the fresh food over here came from a natural, wonderful place like this. I do think we need a little color over here on this side though, so I'm thinking about putting a small badge up top with a slightly vintage shape, and inside I'll write serving since 1965, because older dates just tend to make a brand feel more authentic and trustworthy. Then right above the lush fields can go Subway's slogan, eat fresh. Now as an optional bonus, I think it would be cool to have a little golden sticker that would be placed on every wrapper that says something like certified fresh. And with that, the new Subway design is complete. I really like this one and can pretty confidently say that the natural old-timey handmade feeling of this design seems much more like a $15 sandwich than the original one did. And now I've got a special surprise for you guys. I'm going to show you some of the first work I ever did as a graphic designer, which was over 8 years ago when I basically had no knowledge and no skills. I thought it might be fun to make a portfolio of all this old work using Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace has thousands of award-winning. Last but certainly not least, we have McDonald's. But to mix it
I just skipped the sponsor.
up a bit, out of all of McDonald's many food items, I'm choosing to tackle their fried apple pies, because I think it'd just be fun to do a dessert this time around. Also for this one, I definitely want to go with more of that traditional expensive look, because even though these little guys are less than $2 right now, if they follow the trend of McDonald's other items, they'll soon need a fancy new look to match the inflated price. Let's start with a muted green color for the new box, kind of like a slightly more classy version of the original design's color. So when it comes to baked goods, I think the best thing really is to just show people the actual product via see-through material like plastic, but in this case, we're stuck with a cardboard paper box. So the next best thing is to show an image of the item, which I'll have peeking in from the right, taking up a fair amount of space because it is the main attraction. Now we need to try to make this thing look the best it possibly can. So step one is getting rid of all of this greenish color the original image had in it, converting it to a brown hue like the rest of the pastry. We want to avoid this looking like a flat image at all costs, and darkening up this side will really help push the natural round shape the pastry already has. I might even go in here and add in some extra shadows to make it look like the pastry shell is even higher above the filling, like the dough is more spread out. Finally, some extra sharpening for a crispy, flaky look. Obviously, I want to have this look like it's sitting on top of the box, so I'll need a slightly sharp drop shadow along this side, but to make it feel more soft and natural, I'll put an additional shadow along the front up here. As you can see, it's pretty subtle, but you can still feel the difference. If you really want to ground something to the scene though, it's the ambient occlusion that does the trick. So the edge of this pastry is going to get a nice soft darkness to it, and then the part that's closest to the ground is going to be really dark. Lastly, one little burst of light catching this part of the filling will wrap it up. Now, one thing you might notice is that baked goods that are too perfect look processed like they just came off the factory line. So really, it's all these little imperfections that sells something as handcrafted. A pretty common trait amongst expensive things. The catch, though, of course, is if you put a rough, crumbly pastry on a paper plate, it looks cheap. But put the same thing on an elegant platter, and it looks artisan. So basically, as long as the rest of the box looks fancy, so to speak, we can play into this handcrafted feel. Like adding in some extra crumbs around the base of the pastry, like its delicate crust is slowly flaking away. You do have to be careful not to go too overboard with the crumbs, though, or else it can look messy. And you know, another element that always gives that fresh baked feel is a touch of leftover flour still on the prep surface. And not only does this give us an interesting feeling of going from an in-progress area of flour and crumbs to a more refined one over here, but the flour acts as a giant white strip that draws your eye directly through the pastry. I think I'd like some kind of decorative border like this to go around the left side of the box, traveling underneath the pastry once again to give us more depth. And this thing is going to shine a wonderful gold color. Now ideally, this border on the box would be physically beveled, so it would be raised above the regular surface. And a quick tip, if you're trying to make gold mock-ups look more realistic, make sure to add in really bright areas right next to really dark ones, because you want that really shiny, playful interaction of light. Throw in a bit of bloom on the shiniest parts, and you've got something pretty convincing. Inside of this, I'll put apple pie in an elegant serif typeface, but it'll be more of a shiny, creamy enamel color instead of gold, just so it stands out. I will, however, put the word baked up top as a golden accent, maybe even give that a high-class arch, with a dot on each side for decoration. I will say, though, that these areas in here feel a little too empty, so I got a couple of wheat leaves I can put on each side, just to make people think about the high-quality ingredients that went into making this delicious pie. I'll darken this section inside the border just to help all of our text stand out more, and I even found this nifty little stippling texture that I'll place on top, which to me gives it a very refined, fancy feeling. We can't forget the golden arches themselves, which will go proudly up top, and I'll stick Always Fresh down here at the bottom to help balance out the McDonald's logo above. And with that, we have a delicate, delicious treat that looks like it came from one of the finest bakeries in town. The gold foil might cut into their profit margins a little bit, but a small bump in price could fix that right up and would be well worth it. Now, if you want to see me make knockoff brands of popular products that are better than the real things, well then watch this